you. And now I would like to turn the stage over to Jenn Junod. She is, let's see what I got here. I got you are the developer advocate or a developer advocate for Aiven and the host of Teach Gen Tech. And I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it out loud. Shit, you don't want to talk about the podcast. So,
I was gonna say, I just do cool shit. That's
yeah.
basically my job.
Th- It sounds like the perfect job. We would all love the job of do cool shit. And if I could get a business card that just says does cool shit, I'd be all over it. So, Jen, the stage is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And hello, beautiful humans. As you heard, my name is Jenn Junod, and welcome to Breaking the Stigma of Mental Health and Neurodiversity at Work. It is definitely something that is talked about and not talked about. And I feel like it's such a good picks up at really well after Felix's. I didn't ask you how to say this, and now I'm gonna get mixed up of Felix's, like
Yeah,
me
Felix.
and okay, Felix's. Thank you. And we talked about this before. As a heads up, I am not a mental health professional. There will be discussions about mental health topics, and I bring this up because there is going to be specific parts brought up, and just like, if it's too much for you, walk away. It's going to be your best bet. Shut it down or ask questions. Only you can gauge that. So we have a fancy dancy agenda slide. You'll find out who I am, understand a bit more about mental health and neurodiversity. What is the stigma and why do we want to break it? What do we do to self advocate and creating a supportive environment for yourself and others at work? And then some action items for you. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right. So I am always in evolving, learning new things to overcome trauma I've experienced. So, y'all, I'm not going to go into the details about it. If you want to hear a lot of details, you can go check out my podcast, Shit You Don't Want to Talk About. I will say, on a high level overview, it crosses many dimensions and different times of my life that it really helped me be able to talk about this now. It is something that, to this day, I have mental health struggles. I found out that a company here in Denver, wrote an article about me about being a tech leader here in Denver. And my reaction was not, oh my God, yes, this is like so ridiculously cool. It was, "Ugh, um, yeah, I don't deserve that. I don't know why they did that." And it's like that the backwards response to it. And those are still struggles I have to this day. And this is a big reason why, but not the only reason why. I am neurodivergent. I have ADHD, depression, bipolar type 2, anxiety. I'm dyslexic and PTSD. I also mentioned dyslexic. So if you see things misspelled, the sentence doesn't make sense, or I'm missing letters, please let me know. So that way I can go fix it because I probably didn't notice. It's very annoying. And also, I just want to say with my ADHD, I straight up finished my deck about an hour ago. Like I had variations of it, but it got done an hour ago. I am a developer advocate at Aiven. They are the trusted open source data platform for everyone. AKA, I started doing what's next, which is live streaming Teach Gen Tech. And that was super fun. And I found out through live streaming about tech and learning live that databases are like so cool. Data is really cool. And so, yeah, I now work at Aiven, which is does all things data. And I am also the host of Shit You Don't Want to Talk About, where I literally talk about all the shit you don't want to talk about. I talk about death, um, stigmas, mental health, neurodiversities, uh, transphobia, uh, poop. We literally have talked about it all. It's currently on pause. I got to get, all my projects together. And yes, that in a nutshell is who I am. Now, this is, I think, a really good breakdown of mental health and neurodiversity. People a lot of times will put, excuse me, will put them hand in hand, like they're the same. They're not exactly the same. They coincide together. Mental health, as Felix also described it in his talk, is more about a person's condition with regard to their psychological and emotional well being. So that's like the overall human. Like, how do they cope with normal stress? What about work productivity? And are you fulfilled by it? How do you contribute to community? Like, emotional, psychological, social, spiritual, physical well being. All of these go into mental health. Now, there are mental health conditions such as anxiety, mood disorders, psychotic disorders, eating disorders, addictive behaviors. And all of these are different parts of our mental health and they can ebb and flow. They're not something that just stays the same. So that goes into neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is a concept and social movement that advocates for viewing brain differences as normal rather than defects. And this is something that if y'all haven't looked him up, he will be mentioned in the resources of something of Wesley Faulkner taught me so much while I was on my journey. My first call when I was like, hey, I want to become a developer advocate was with Wesley Faulkner. And he mentioned that he's ADHD and dyslexic. I'm like, what? I can be in tech and be these things? Okay, well, let's do it. And it was something that I already had the podcast, and it was amazing to be able to start learning and talking about this. Yet I never knew you could have these neurodivergencies at work. I didn't think it was possible. I'd always been shut down or told, Jen, stay in your lane. Jen, you're doing it wrong. Jen, can't you get it right? Jen, well, how did you do this? Jen, like do a report. It just never clicked. So I didn't think it was possible, but it was. Now, how common is it to be neurodivergent or have mental health conditions at work? It's actually 15 to 20% of the workforce, and that's not including who's may not be officially diagnosed. A lot of the population has seen that they may have different conditions like ADHD or dyslexia, but they're not actually diagnosed. And, so the really fun part of this entire conversation, which I actually completely changed this slide because stigma is a much deeper conversation than can be included in this deck itself, in this talk. It is something that I talk about quite a bit, yet we can't talk about all of the stigmas in the world. I wish we could. For those who may be familiar with a word by context but don't have a definition, stigma is a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. And there's four major parts of stigma. Self stigma, like more of internalizing something, like saying, I'm in disgrace because I have ADHD. That is me saying it against myself. Public stigma is other people telling me, Jen, Jen, you're not that cool. You're not cool because you have ADHD. That's public. Then you have professional stigma, and that's what I was mentioning earlier was, Jen, stay in your lane. Jen, you're being too ADHD. Dude, just like, can you get your life together? And then there's institutional stigma, which in my mind, institutional could also be like systemic, but the for today we're going to stick with like schooling for institutional, and that is more of what a lot of those born as female were not diagnosed with ADHD until their late 20s and 30s. Because it wasn't until the last 10, 15 years that it was realized that it looks so different from boys between girls. And that's something that created a stigma within schools. So, why is breaking the stigma important? It's It's important because it creates equitable opportunities. And I specifically, like, I had to go hunt down this photo because there is a difference between equality and equity. Equality is just giving everybody the box, like, yo, you need heels, you need heels, you need heels, or I'm going to give everybody a step ladder. Let's give everyone a step ladder. Well, that's not going to help if somebody, and I know this is a global event. Please bear with me. I only know US measurements yet. Let's say somebody is 6'2" and they have a ladder, and I'm 5'2" and I have the same ladder, and the fence is 7 foot. I'm not going to be able to see over it. So that is what equality is, giving everybody the same thing. Now, equity is where we give people what they need to succeed. This goes into so many different topics, which I would love to dive into. But today we're going to focus on mental health and neurodiversity at work. And we will go through tools and what different accommodations could look like later on. It fosters inclusion. So, inclusion is like there's three parts that really go together is diversity, inclusion, and equity. And each of these is inclusion is like saying like, "Hey, you want to like be a part of this book? Like do this book club with me." And I would go, "Dude, I'm not going to do a book club with you. I can't read." Well, I mean, I can read, but it'll take me like 6 months to read a book that would take you like a week. That is not including me in it. Like, it's including me, but not really including me. Where if I am able to use a tool like text to speech or an audiobook, I'm being able to be included because there's different accommodations and being able to bring along everyone. It also promotes understanding and respect, which develops curiosity. This is a big part of why it's so important to break the stigma. A lot of times, these stigmas are created because we were taught them. We were taught that something is not cool. I don't know what other word to say for it. We're taught that it's different, so it's bad, where a lot of times it's not. It's just we don't know how to find out more about it or how to ask these questions, and breaking the stigma will help with that. And it also increases productivity and innovation because I know from my dyslexic ADHD brain, I don't think like a lot of people. And this is something that I've heard a lot. And then Wesley Faulkner also put in his talk is if you met one neurodiverse person, you've met one neurodiverse person. We are all so different, even if we have the exact same diagnoses. We are all very, very different. And it improves health and well-being, which overall is definitely something that when you're able to work somewhere that is allowing you to be yourself, you're able to take care of yourself more. So, should I or should I not share about my own neurodivergency and mental health at work? Huh. Nah, I don't know. I don't know if I want to. This face is very accurate. Hey. So, here's some questions to ask yourself because it's not always the right call. What are my reasons for considering disclosure? Is it something that, if I talk about being ADHD, it would help me, maybe my boss understand why it can take me forever and a day to get a task done? Or should I talk about being bipolar type 2 of I can have very depressive days, weeks, months where I'm doing my best and just showing up the best I can. But then maybe between one of those two, I will have a day or a week where I will be getting so much shit done that it made up for the last 3 months that I didn't do much. Those are some pros. But what are the potential risks or negative consequences for disclosing? Will it put me in harm? I've worked at places where I've disclosed this information and I've been excluded from things. I've been told, "Well, Jen, you're just stupid." No, No, I'm not stupid. I just don't think the way they do, which is just different. It's neurodiverse. And how comfortable am I being open about my own mental health challenges and neurodiversities? This is a big thing. Y'all, I have a podcast called Shit You Don't Want to Talk About. So I literally talk about this stuff all the time. It's fun and not fun all at the same time. And it's exhausting. Yet it's my choice to do so. And I get asked a lot of questions, which I'm putting myself out there to answer them. And just think about before you just go, oh, I'm going to go tell everybody. Just make sure you're taking care of yourself first. And choosing to not disclose can be authentic, and choosing to disclose can be authentic. Both can be true. So please know that if you're choosing not to disclose something, you're not being inauthentic. This is something that bugs me the most because this is something that happens a lot with in my role, and so many of our community managers know, as a developer advocate, I have to be on. And just because I'm on doesn't mean I have to disclose all of my information ever to you. That doesn't make me inauthentic because I'm not telling you every single meal that I ate today. But if you're curious, I did give up sugar last week. So we're on like day 8. All right. This is a big thing that I truly, truly think is like, if you take away anything from this talk, take away self advocacy. Because it doesn't matter if you're talking about trying to do this stuff at work, if you're working with your family members, if you're working with your partner, if you're working with your children or your parents or your community, getting to know yourself is going to allow you to show up as yourself and allow you to show up for others. It also really helps you communicate what you need. Because if you don't know yourself, you don't know what to tell people that you need. And seek knowledge and build a supportive network. And this is something that I feel so fortunate about is as I've learned to be myself, I find my humans. And when I wasn't myself, I never knew that there were so many cool humans out there in the world. And yo, Jen, I got this, but my company not so much. What can my company do? Well, they can start with psychological safety. And this one, I did just look up the definition because it's something that I think a lot of us understand this in context, but not necessarily what it means. Team psychological safety is a shared belief held by the members of a team that it's okay to take risks, to express their ideas and concerns, and to speak up with questions and admit to mistakes, all without fear of negative consequences. Currently, I feel very fortunate to work with a team that does that because y'all, I mess up all the time. And I do on my live stream and I do during talks. It's kind of just who I am. Yet I've worked at places that this isn't allowed. Accommodations. These are going to be like tools, either physical tools or virtual tools. For myself, some virtual tools is I use something called Natural Reader. It is text to speech. To actually make this talk, I use tools to make it because ChatGPT, I know it's a very may not be cool, may be cool kind of thing. It helped me kind of put my words into a structure. And then I used my text to speech natural reader to read it to me. So, because that's the way I best comprehend something. And then I was able to make my presentation. Access to mental health resources and education awareness programs. All right, so these are going to be like workshops, trainings, awareness, bringing it up often. Felix brought up the EAP program. There's also ERGs, or which are employee resource groups, also known as DNI, which can be diversity and inclusion. There's a lot of different names for that. Those are different ways that a company can help or at least get the ball started. I did put unconscious bias because that's a thing. It's a thing. And I say it like this because it's really hard to bring up these topics. And unconscious bias uh, are learned by assumptions, beliefs, or attitudes that we aren't necessarily aware of. A lot of times we're trained by our communities, by just our past experiences, and we all have them. Like, for some reason, I just, I don't even know one to say, but like I have biases against mushrooms. I think they're the grossest thing ever. But if I didn't know that, then that would be an unconscious bias. That's the best example I got for right now. But how to combat the unconscious bias is learning about the different types, how they may surface at work, and how to avoid them so you can build a more inclusive and diverse workplace. And a lot of times it starts with just acknowledging it and learning more about it with yourself. Normalize personal days without justification. This is a big one because for many of us, if we're having a bad time because of something going on in our personal life, I've been at companies where I've had to say, like, I had brain surgery in 2020 and my boss got mad at me for having brain surgery. That wasn't even a personal day. That was just like, why are you having brain surgery during our busiest time? It's conference season. What? Like, what? You don't normalize, like, we need to normalize these things so we can take better care of ourselves to actually show up at work. And inclusive hiring practices. This is a big one because we need to create a safe space for the interviewing practices, for the way we go through and put the job descriptions out there in the world. And again, so many of these I could go in on so many different spots, but we're not going to. We're just going to mention it. And how do we talk about this stuff at work? Listen actively. And I really liked what Felix said about mirroring. This is a really, really good way of saying that. Share knowledge, bring it up, just passing conversation. Hey, I read an article on neurodiversity. Sounds kind of cool. Ask open ended questions. And that's like saying, hey, what's your favorite pizza? That's an open ended question. A closed ended question is, hey, do you like pepperoni on your pizza? That is a yes or no question. I like examples. They make my head work a bit better. Use inclusive language. A good example that at least comes to mind is I like to use the phrase "hello, beautiful humans." I didn't even realize I started doing that on the podcast, and other people noticed, which is kind of cool. But something that may not be inclusive is "hey guys." Some people say it is, some people say it isn't, but it's not gender neutral. So that is something to just show a difference of some inclusive language. Encourage professional help. This is a lot to do with when we're allowed to get the resources we need, we're able to show up at work more. Set a positive tone. But as reading through the comments earlier, do not be toxically positive because that is the thing. I mean, you can be an optimist, but dude, there is going to be real things in life. Choose the right time and place and respect boundaries, meaning that if you need to bring this stuff up at work or work is trying to change these things, make sure that you are actually like going at it with good structure and respect people's boundaries, that if they don't want to talk about it, don't make them talk about it. And here's some benefits for both individuals and organizations if they choose to disclose it. Disclose neurodiversities and why it's good to have neurodiversities in the workplace. You gain a better understanding of yourself, enhance support and accommodations, and you're part of reducing the stigma and improved mental well-being. And then for organizations is it definitely gives a diverse and innovative perspectives, increased employee engagement and retention, and enhanced teamwork and collaboration. When people are allowed to show up as themselves, they actually want to contribute a lot of times. It's pretty cool. So here are your lovely action items of understand mental health and neurodiversity, advocate for yourself, break the stigma, create a supportive environment. I'm really just kidding because this is a lot to do and you don't need to be an advocate if you don't want to. And in reality, patience, because this stuff is not linear. It's all over and it ebbs and flows. And sometimes it's going to be great days and sometimes it's going to be absolutely shitty days. And be patient with yourself. And I did include some resources. which include Wesley Faulkner's talk. Maddie Stratton is my boss, and I think this talk really, really goes through quite well about psychological safety. And then I linked in a lot of content of what I did as research for this talk. And let's connect. These are all the platforms you can come hang out with me on. Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and my website are all Jenn Junod, except my website is jenjunod.com. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen. And it actually pronounced your last name with a French Canadian accent, which was incorrect. Jenn Junod, not Jenn
No,
Junod.
no, you weren't incorrect. You weren't incorrect. You said it right. It's uh I went to France and they started talking to me in French and I said hello and they were like, "Oh, you're not French. You have a French last name." So, you were
It's
accurate.
it's a whole other conversation. If you pronounce it as Junod, it is pronounced Junod. That is
It's
my
too
attitude.
American.
All right. Well, what I would like to do now is welcome Felix back to our virtual stage. I would also like to introduce everybody to Kate Sawyer, who is going to join us on our virtual stage here as we start our panel discussion. Kate is a customer success manager at Higher Logic. And Kate, if you want to turn your camera on, that would be awesome. Yay. Um, we've heard from Felix, we've heard from Jen. They've had the opportunity to introduce themselves. Kate, do you want to take just a minute and introduce yourself to everybody here so we know who you are?
Yeah, I think I'm like processing Jen's just like rally of like an awesome presentation. That was awesome. Yeah, I'm Kate. My last name's actually Sauer, like sauerkraut. And I'm in Chicago. And oof, my background. I customer success manager, so kind of like a relationship manager, but also I do a lot on the tech side at Higher Logic to help folks out. Background in nonprofits and associations, and I do a lot of things, but not like super well. But I recently moved over from an association to Higher Logic about 2 years ago. And I have a fun is a bit about me, and I have a very large cat who is sleeping now, but he might come up here during our chat.
Awesome.
And that is a lot of information about me.
That's great. No, it's awesome. The Q&A is 100% open, so anybody wants to drop a question in there, you can do so. It'll be completely anonymous, as I said before. You can also post questions in the general chat as well if you would like. Those ones won't be as anonymous as the ones going into Q&A. Yeah, so throw those in, and we'll be asking them as we go through our panel conversation. But I am going to kick things off here with asking the panel if they have some effective strategies or programs that organizations can implement to promote mental health and well-being in the workplace.
You mean organizations that we can recommend or things that we've seen go well in organizations? Is that, of course we don't know
the organization that you currently work for, that I currently work for, what would be a strategy or program that that organization might be able to implement to promote mental health and well-being?
There's there's a quick answer to that. There's one organization that I'm not affiliated with at all. They're called Mental Health First Aiding, and what they do is a lot of awareness building. So they would be involved in smashing the stigma, educating people around mental health, how to identify someone who's maybe in a crisis. That's definitely good from an awareness point of view. I would say it's not enough to just know about it. You need to be able to engage on something, and you want to move the needle on mental health. Just knowing that someone is in distress is not going to help. So I would say awareness really important as a first step, but you need to move into kind of prevention and kind of actually moving the needle on the actual numbers of people that feel not well at work. So that's my short answer to that.
I have a couple thoughts on that. I think thought is companies will not do enough, and so I'm like coming in strong. They will not do enough, and we have to look out for ourselves. So my initial thought of like number one things that corporations and organizations can do is like pay better and offer more time off. Obviously, there's no magic wand for that, but those are two things. I think having time off where you don't have to put a reason, and a really great next step is like unlimited sick time. I think that is really important, especially post and during pandemic, is being able to take sick time, honor that, and being really clear that you have a job to come back to. So I feel very like strongly about these things. I'm sure there's other resources. I know, Felix, you mentioned like EAPs. I haven't had great experiences with those. I think having a best friend at work and being able to correlate and foster connections outside of work with people that you feel safe with will get you ideas of, oh, did you know chiropractor is included with our insurance? Things that you might have to dig for with your HR or, company versus someone that's kind of done the work already. Sorry, I just came in hot. I'm like, I got some some feelings on this.
I like it. One, you both brought up such good points, and I love the fact that you brought up work bestie. Like, I'm still best friends with one of my work besties from like 7 years ago, because it's just, we're going to go through life together now. One thing that I wanted to say that is, it's something that helps at work, yet not something that, there are things that will move the needle quickly, and there's things that will move the needle long term. And you kind of have to come about it from many different angles. And something that I appreciate is when I've worked at companies that have hands-on workshops. Like, one I recently went to is adapt adapt adaptivity adaptivity there we go, and resilience. So it talked through, like, how do you deal with this, and how do you deal with it at work? How do you deal with it for yourself, and how do you deal with it in a group? How do you deal with it for yourself? How do you deal with it with your boss or somebody that reports to you? And it is a lot about training the emotional intelligence, so EQ, instead of just the IQ of intellectual intelligence, like go start to code.
Yeah, that's great. I I feel particularly fortunate in the organization that I'm at, that the we call it the people and culture department. It's human resources, really, just with a different name. They do seem to be doing a very good job at trying to support the employees, and recognizing mental health issues and stuff like that. But I appreciate that we are probably in the minority for a number of companies out there. I would be very curious to hear if any of you had any thoughts on ideas, tips, tricks for individuals to be able to approach their HR departments, approach their management, approach their executive, because I can appreciate that a lot of people might be a little bit concerned about, how do I ask for these types of resources? How do I ask for these types of considerations to be brought in at a company-wide level, an organization-wide level? There's the concern, one of, I don't want to be seen as the squeaky wheel. I don't want to maybe necessarily disclose my own particular situation, whether it be a mental health struggle that I'm going through, or a neurodivergence that I'm not necessarily comfortable with disclosing. At the same time, I want to advocate for change within my organization. Any ideas on how somebody could maybe do that in a less aggressive way, if you know what I mean?
I have thoughts. uh, I'm working on the words to say it, though. It is always going to be your own personal gauge, because unfortunately we live in a world that there is always going to be a risk. I've worked at companies where I was let go for standing up for other people. I've been let go for also for having mental health stuff. It's not, and not all people are going to be in the same boat that this is going to be teared up, of being able to possibly lose their job for admitting that they're having mental health issues or that they need help. And it's something that's why Like, I put that slide in there because ask yourself these 3 questions, because yourself, keeping yourself safe is so much more important than the shit people at work may put you through. I think having it where you have a therapist that you work with that can help you game plan this. What's the contingency plans if something does go wrong? What will you do long term? How will you recover from this? How will you recover if they shut you down? How will you recover if they use it against you? They retaliate? And also, what will you do if they're okay with it? And now you're actually getting the help, but now you have to talk about it. What do you do then? Because that's a new scary thing. And it's definitely something that I would say my personality is just to go, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing and I need help. And I heard this is a really cool thing. I want to try it. So let me try it. That's not exactly where I've worked in corporations where that's not an option. And I was able to say to my boss, and this is actually where, Kate, I love that you brought up your work Steve, because when I was on sales and like call center, and we had a the requirement was you got a 15-minute lunch, or two 15-minute breaks and a 30-minute lunch. That's it. 8-hour day dealing with really mean people. But because my boss knew that I was dealing with a bunch of shit, have dealt with a bunch of shit, but I could really sell, he would give exceptions for me and my work bestie to go walk around the parking lot like 7 times. So that way I got it off of my plate, and then I would go like sell 5K. So it was something that you don't always need to change the system, but make differences for your just having conversations like a work bestie, or just to your boss or somebody else that can influence your environment.
Mhm. What I was gonna add on to that in terms of like actually like influencing like company decisions and things like that from a system and process is like I have had success talking to and forming those bonds with like leadership, and then having them advocate on my behalf. Long-standing relationships, especially if your company has acquired other folks, is that has helped being like, hey, we need leadership to mirror like they're taking mental health days, they're blocking off time for work-life balance, they're taking an hour lunch, they're following those processes that to. And if your people leader isn't, that might not be a safe environment for you in general. And that's going to affect everybody's mental health.
Yeah, I think this is spot on. I think I've seen that, if you look at leadership, you will, if you have like, let's say you have 10, 12 people in leadership, like who are really in the higher echelons, there will be 1 or 2 of them are likely to have, of course, everyone has mental health, so all of them will have had issues, and some of them will have been open about it, maybe 1 or 2 or 3. And I've always found that it's unlikely to be HR, actually, because they are even more reminded of red tape and all the law and all the kind of legal requirements. But very often you find someone, whether it's head of operations or someone else who has maybe personally or on LinkedIn or somewhere been a bit more vulnerable about having issues, having been to therapy, these kinds of things. And I think often that's a good way in and say, hey, maybe you get time with those guys at various points, and I don't want to say disclose, but kind of try and find an in and say, hey, I've got these things. Do you have advice of how I should navigate the organization? And I remember my boss disclosed to me that they were in therapy, and that's the reason why I went to therapy. I was like, that's great. And now I've been once I was running an 130 people office, I would stand up on Friday and say, I'm going to have therapy tomorrow, and that I know that helped other people. So it's finding the right people and then role modeling for everyone else around us. So those are I think you're spot on.
Talking about setting boundaries, which is something that came up in your presentation there, Felix. Certainly something that I am still trying to figure out how to do properly. One thing that I think might be a somewhat easy lift for a lot of people in their organizations, because I think this comes across as not overly aggressive, I guess to say, is in our organization, we've started including in our email signatures the following. At the company where I work, we work flexibly. So while it suits me to send this email now, I do not expect a response or action outside of your own working hours. Now, what I like about that is it is giving permission to the receiver of that email that they can respond whenever it is suitable for them to respond. And even if I'm sending it at 10 o'clock at night or 2 in the morning or what have you, um, I've given the permission to the receiver to respond when it is appropriate for them. But by doing that, I have also then passively set my own boundaries as to I'm going to respond, I'm going to send this email when it's suitable for my working hours as well. And I think something along those lines, again, I'm not being super aggressive. I'm not saying, look, I'm only going to answer emails between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. or whatever, but I'm also very just, I'm stating, I think, quite clearly in something like that, that I've got my working hours, you've got your working hours. Emails will be sent during those periods of time. I would love to get thoughts from the panel as to something like this or other ideas where we can start to better define what our boundaries are, again, without maybe being super, and that might be my own Canadianness, I guess, in terms of not wanting to firmly plant a flag in the sand, but at the same time, starting to define those boundaries, because I think that is something that certainly in North America, um, from a company side of things, we struggle with. Since the advent of the BlackBerry, and since then, when we can answer our emails at any time at night while we're watching TV, it's gotten hard.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think I was going to do like a stream of consciousness, but I was thinking something that would be more concrete that's worked well for me is I do everything. And if I give you a link and there's not availability, you don't get my time. And I think that's hard when we have like a people pleasing tendency at a lot of companies. And I work in retention, so customer success of like escalations, something isn't wrong, sales expectations, and finding that in between. This is what I can do for you, and this is what I can, right? And I think that is hard for, I think, some people to swallow, but it has helped me tremendously be able to own my own time, block off things, and be able to say, I have to leave at this time. And the consequences, like, you might be unhappy. And that is so hard as a former people pleaser to say, I know this client is unhappy right now, but will they still renew? Yeah. Will they be unhappy right now? Yeah. And that's okay. So just that Calendly has saved me in so many ways. And so please use it, everyone.
And I think it's a great point, and I've just this week started using it, and I think it definitely kind of like technology can help finally reclaim some of the stuff. And I think we also need to realize we can't save everyone. We can't save everyone, and we can't save all our clients. Like we want to do well. We want them to come back. We want them to be retained, but we won't save everyone. If we don't save, if we miss that one, there will be another one that we won't be able to save. So work will never stop, whether we work 12 hours or 14 hours, it will just be never ending. And the only nuance to add to that is, I think what I've always responded well to is if people come to me and say, Felix, I can't do this because it's, my day is too tight. I can do A or B. So that would allow me to respect the boundary and say they can't do it all, but they would then say, well, can you find a compromise? Can we sacrifice A and then I can do B? And that, I think, very often helps in kind of getting out of the bind.
For myself, and something that's really worked well is setting expectations of I don't know how long it took me to get back to, well, yeah, Pat, I've not replied to you. And then Felix, I forgot to reply to you until like yesterday or maybe even this morning. Then yeah, and I've dropped the ball many times, and same with Lori. So it's a lot of, for me, is setting the expectations of, hey, I have different energies. That there's gonna be days where I'm like, cool, I got it. I'm gonna remember everything and I'm gonna do it. And then there's gonna be times where I'm like, I don't know what happened yesterday. Yeah, I don't know. And I forget. And I try to tell people that because telling them up front also allows me to let them know when I can't and can, but also when I'm doing something last minute, putting in my message to them, because I work for a global company as well, of going, hey, I don't think you're online. It's probably like 10 p.m. there, but if you're around, could you answer this question, please? But if not, my fire is not your problem. It's my fire. It's my fault for waiting till last minute. But if you're free, that would be awesome. And that being said, also doing that with calls as well. So setting the expectations, and it's a lot of teaching people how you want to be treated. Of I do last minute calls with my friends, as friends, colleagues, we'll say colleagues, all the time, because yeah, that's how we function. We're those kind of people. But if we're not free, we're not free. It's not always going to work out well. And being able to be like, cool, dude, you free right now? Let's work this out. Or no, dude, I'm not free. And just setting these expectations really helped. But also telling people that I take on too much or I forget a lot of things. Cause I am that out of sight, out of mind thing. Like I'm supposed to be working on this developer champions program thing. And unless we're doing it during the co-working session, I don't get a lot of movement on it. So, learning that, I was like, "Hey, y'all, we need to set up like a 2-hour co-working session once a week so I actually work on this. Because if we don't, I'm not going to do it. And if there's somebody else not there, I'm not going to do it. So, you don't need to talk to me. You just need to be like on the other side of the screen."
I identify with all the neurodivergent stuff that you're talking about there, Jen. And actually, just on a call with my coach this morning, we talked about the value in recognizing what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and that it is not inappropriate to go back to your boss, your manager, your executive, what have you, with saying, "This is what I'm good at. This is what you want me to do. You're asking me to do this other thing that I'm not good at. You know who is good at that? This other person. We're going to be better off getting that person to do it. It's not my strength." And there's probably some empowerment there. At the same time, again, and maybe this is my people pleaser, my Canadianness. I don't know what it is. I know that I'm personally going to struggle with turning some of those requests down, but if I can get over that and start to get more comfortable with it myself, then yeah, everybody's better off. I'm better off. I'm healthier. My boss is better off because the work's actually getting done by somebody who's good at doing it. All that type of stuff.
Do not disturb. Sorry, I almost forgot that. Do not disturb on your phone. Like on iPhones, if you do not disturb, you can customize it, but it will make it so that way you can't even see the notification numbers. So you could do whatever you want and you're not getting notified that somebody tried to ask you to do something. It's one of the biggest things in my life.
It's funny with the whole, tech stuff, and I'm old enough to have started before we had, essentially pocket computers that allowed us to access email and instant messages any time of day. Um, it's it's a really, for me, interesting two-edged sword, in that in one way I love the idea of being able to send somebody a direct message, and um, in my head it's always like, when you have the time to deal with this direct message that I've sent you, deal with it. It is not necessarily something you need to deal with right now. Whereas if I went up to a coworker's desk and I'm literally standing right next to them, clearly you need to deal with whatever it is I'm coming to you right now because I'm standing right next to you. If I just send you a message or an email, you kind of get to it when you want to get to it. The flip side of that, obviously, is as we're receiving these messages, it can be very hard for at least some of us to not feel the need to deal with it as soon as it comes in. So it's an interesting, again, double-edged sword that tech has brought us to. So yeah, do not disturbs, or set to busy or what have you, or even just knowing in your heart that I don't have to deal with it this second. I can get back to this in an hour. Is a good thing.
Just two quick things to that point. One, when I arrived in the UK, I'd never been in an open plan office before, because in Germany I worked for half a year and it was smaller offices. So I come into this room, I'm like, you mean like there are 150 people here typing on the phone, and you expect me to like do a deck like in this situation? It's like I was completely horrified. So I got these 3M kind of there's no technology, it's literally just blocking out noise. So I just bought these for me and my team, and everyone loved them. And also when you wear them, no one comes to you to disturb you and ask you a stupid question, because you look like you're really intensely doing stuff. So that's one. And then I put a link in called Manual of Me. If you work with teams, if you work with co-workers, you can just fill in a quick questionnaire of your working preferences, and then the other person also does it, and then you're like, oh, that's how you process information. Great. Oh, you're you get up early. Great. I don't. So perfect. And then 100 misunderstandings don't occur, and you work much better. It's really good.
Well, that's awesome. I do something similar there, Felix. I've got big headphones like this that I wear at my desk, and sometimes there's music playing and sometimes there isn't music playing. But regardless whether I got music or not, if I've got the big headphones on, 9 times out of 10, nobody's bugging me at my desk. So I am going to flip this over a little bit to this idea of being an ally or helping out others. So we've talked about this idea of having a work bestie, or if you're a old person like me who's been around when the term was work wife or work husband, I think work bestie is a significantly better term than either one of those. So I'm going to start using that now. Thank you very much for introducing that to my, and why I hadn't thought of it before, I don't know. But anyways, work bestie. If you want to be an ally for your work bestie has disclosed to you that they are suffering through some type of mental health issue, or they've got a neurodiversity that has not been necessarily dealt with. Are there any recommendations that you folks might have in terms of how you could, potentially be a good ally and support those people if they're disclosing that to you in a work environment?
I have thoughts on this. So I think one, at least thinking of like customer success for me, when things like this come up, it's like, well, how can I take some of your work, some of the clients you're working with, put me on some meetings that I can help run? That's something at like the surface level. And then two is like, if I have that better relationship with a people leader or someone in HR, is like, how can I find out this information in a safe way for someone? But I think, at least in my experience, it's like, if I can't give them money, if I can't give them good insurance, right? It's how can I take the workload off of you? And if you put me on meetings with clients, I can do that work for you. The other thing that I thought about during this conversation, it's like, we're being vulnerable, is like the privilege, right? Because I'm identified as like a cis white woman, is like, there's a lot of, I think, privilege in being able to talk and not feel like threatened. Is, I think, especially mental health in the workplace, there's a lot of people who feel like they can't bring up anything at all because they identify as something different. So that has been my experience, at least when someone else is going through crisis, is what can I just take off your plate? And then next level, maybe I bring in a people leader. Unfortunately, at least in my experience, I haven't had a lot of help with HR and people leadership within that department. So just my thoughts there.
Felix, Jenn, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think as a white straight guy, I had to eat a humble pie on what it means to be an ally and how to do it, what not to do. So my main experience has been I cocked it up, and I had to learn a bunch. I think the main thing I would, from that point of view, I would say is that it's for example, I took paternity leave, which was unpaid at the time, and I looked after my 9-month-old for 3 months, and and my employer couldn't fire me, which I was at the time proud about. But of course, everyone's like, well, your wife is doing like 3 times the amount, so how come you are being celebrated on LinkedIn for this stuff, and your wife just expected to be able to do that? So I've learned. I think I've tried to learn an element of this stuff. I think it's just like remembering that that it's very difficult feeling, and that it's impossible to really know what they're going through. So just doing a lot more listening and lot less talking is probably the first two things that I would tell myself all the time, rather than making assumptions and kind of coming to help. But Kate, I love your idea about taking work away. I think that's so powerful and difficult to do, but it's an amazing gift to some.
I would say, at least with my experiences, and my work besties that I'm still best friends with today, um, is at work, it's not always the work itself. It can be the environment that they're in. And the humans that I care about most, that I'm still friends with, are people that were being discriminated against for race, for their sex, for their, like, there's a lot that went into it. And I really appreciate that Felix called it out of like, I'm a short white chick that's straight. That is also very bubbly and annoying. I can be, believe me, I know. And yet watching them be discriminated against was heartbreaking, and having to choose, what can I influence and what do I help them out with? Because me going up and saying, bitch, why are you talking to my friend that way, is not going to be helpful. Sometimes it is. I'm scrappy, but also being able to be in the room of saying, hey, people of color at our company are not getting the same type of opportunities that white dudes are. Why? And having people look at it when they're not in the room. Also, listening to them and deciding, is this something you want? Do you want me to listen, or do you want me to help problem solve? And that is something that's been so difficult of, if they want me to listen, just listen. If they want me to problem solve, I'm going to go at it. And if it's serious enough, telling them to F off, and I'm going to call emergency services. And that's something that is hard to watch anybody go through, but can happen at work too.
Yeah, I think that's great. Um, I had one thought to add to that, which as is very quickly escaping my head, so I might not be able to grasp onto it before it's completely gone. Um, yeah, I think it. Yeah, I guess the only thing that I would add on to that is just going back to, and you brought it up, Jen, and it's one of my favorite quotes around the neurodivergent community of just like, you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. So just making sure that we, as people who are maybe trying to advocate or be an ally for other people, recognize the fact that no matter how many books we've read, how many other people we know who may be going through similar types of situations, everybody is an individual, and we need to respect that everybody's journey is their own. So what might have worked for one person isn't necessarily going to work for somebody else, or what might be a comfort zone for one person isn't necessarily a comfort zone for somebody else. So we need to keep that in mind. And then Felix, again, I appreciate where you're coming from as a straight white man. I feel that I am still trying to figure out how to be the best ally that I can be in all the spaces where I can be an ally, and will probably always be learning that for the rest of my life. But if we can keep our eyes and ears open and be willing to learn, then I think that's hopefully what we can do. Recognizing that we are pretty much at the end of our time, I want to thank everybody, Felix, Jen, Kate, for presenting and sitting in on our discussion. I want to thank those who attended today. This has been fantastic. I've enjoyed not only doing the organization leading up to the event, but the event today. It's been great. Certainly something very near and dear to my heart. I wish that we could just spend the rest of the afternoon, evening for Felix into the night, just to sit around and enjoy some drinks and continue to talk about this stuff, because it's been absolutely fantastic. But yeah, Thank you, everybody. I will close with just letting everybody know that if you've enjoyed this event, make sure that you sign up for membership with your local CMX chapter. You can also check out, if you don't want to sign up for a specific chapter, you can check out any events coming up at events.cmxhub.com. There are events happening all the time, and you can look for events that are either happening directly in your area that you can go to in person, as well as virtual events like this one that are of interest to you. And really, that's it. Again, thank you very much, everybody. And yeah, it's been lovely. My heart is full, as they say. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks
Bye,
for all.
everyone.
Bye, guys.